Welcome to the Recovering Perfectionist Podcast, where I empower you to develop sustainable habits, challenge society, and take messy action. I'm Christine, life balance coach and world champion ballroom dancer, and I believe that everyone has the power to create their very own life by design. The Recovering Perfectionist Podcast was created with a mission to encourage a life of abundance by finding peace and acceptance in our own imperfections and developing healthy self-love through sustainable habits and manifestation. It's time to align with the universe for the full human experience and redefine what it really means to be successful.
It's too good, the secret is out and wow.
Welcome back to another episode of the Recovering Perfectionist Podcast. I am here with one of my very good friends who became a good friend of mine because he married one of my best friends, which makes it awesome if you know how that goes. This is Chris Hayden, and he is a pastor, a podcast host, doing all the things. And guys, we're going to get into something that I honestly never thought I would talk about on this podcast or any podcast for that matter. But because Chris came into my life through his wife, one of my best friends, he has made this type of conversation for me so much more like manageable to have. And I know people are like, what are we talking about? We're talking about religion. Chris, say hi to the people.
Hello, everyone. And also, I have to say, one, it's just always good to see you. I love you, and I'm glad to be here. As virtually as we can be together. But also, like, I'm very flattered by that. That your introduction made me feel very good inside.
Thank you. Well, I need it.
That's what what you described is kind of my whole, like, I think that's maybe why I was born, is to do exactly what you just said.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, seriously. We've known each other now, Chris, for, when did you get married?
2016. I should probably remember that number.
Yeah, no, you're worried. No worries. So so about 5 years. Yeah. And your wife.
I wish everybody could meet Francisca before they understood how weird it is that she married a pastor.
100%. Because I wanted to get into that a little bit, which goes into what we're going to discuss is the concept of when someone says, it's kind of like you introduce yourself at a party and you're like, I'm a pastor, right? And immediately there's stereotypes, there's, conversations directed towards a certain topic. I'm going to avoid this with you. I'm going to do, right? That's just how society really works.
I should have asked, is there swearing on this podcast or should I avoid it?
You can do whatever. We're adults. Okay.
So that's so what the scenario you're describing is something I've experienced many times where because I'm a natural extrovert. I'm a very kind of like, hey, how's it going? Who are you? I like that when I'm in a group of people, that's kind of how I naturally am. Mm-hmm. And so I always end up in conversations with people, and then we get to know each other, and then eventually somebody's like, so what do you do? That's the question that naturally comes up. And then I have to say I'm a pastor, and I can see it in their eyes. They start rewinding the conversation to try and figure out all the shit they said that they didn't. And the easiest way to disarm that I've found is to just simply say some cuss words.
Oh,
when the pastor says cuss words, all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay. It's like, no, I'm not here to judge you. Right. I'm not here to and fill in the blank with all kinds of Christian stereotypes. I'm here at a party. I'm having fun.
Right. And when you're with us, when we're all together, I don't think about that either. I forget that you're a pastor because that's crazy. And it almost I'm kind of almost mad at myself for that, because it's like the stereotype we've grown up with for so long of what a pastor is. It's like, why can't you be both? Why can't you be a pastor and be someone who is, like you said, can cuss at a party or can have a good time? And I think so many people think that those two things don't go hand in hand. You're sinning, or you're doing something wrong. You're not obeying God. You're not doing whatever. And I think that's what we want to get into, is kind of the perfectionism that lies in every aspect of your life, especially in religion.
So I would say I want to acknowledge the stereotype of a pastor. It's not unearned.
Mm-hmm.
Like there, like a big part of my starting point in faith and in Christianity is and professional Christianity,
Right.
I always joke that I'm a professional Christian, but like my calling into actually doing this for a living started in the area of the church has really like screwed the dog here. Like we've, especially in the West, and like we've really lost the thread. And what you're describing about perfectionism and moral absolution and all these things, like I think that is the realm. We took this thing that was supposed to be life-giving and self-reflective,
like a guiding force.
Yeah, like it's supposed to be helpful. That it's the whole point is that it's supposed to help you to enjoy and live more fully and be more honest and be more sincere. That's what it's supposed to do. And instead we got caught up in I think pointing outward and behavioral control of other people. Like I think it becomes oppressive very easily, given it, and in its current format, like basically how most churches are.
Right. Well, for me, I'm always looking for freedom. Like, everything with government and all of these, 9-to-5 jobs and all this stuff. Like I preach that you should live a life of freedom. What does freedom look like for you? It looks different for everybody. And when I was growing up, I did not see church as being freedom or a guiding force or helpful for multiple reasons. And one was because my friends dreaded going to church on Sunday with their parents. Oh, I can't hang out with you because I got to go to church. And it was always this like Debbie Downer moment. And I'm like, well, why would I do that? That doesn't seem fun. My parents, for those who know, my father
it almost
is French.
Exclusively is not fun.
It's almost, exactly. Exactly. And my father is French and he grew up, I was actually baptized Catholic in France because I was born over there. And my father used to go to church all the time, but these giant, like, ethereal type churches that have been around for
there's lots of ritual,
oh my God.
Ancient history.
And these are places that tourists visit, Notre Dame, the cathedral in Rouen, where I was born, all of these amazing, you walk in there and you feel a presence, you know what I mean? There's no carpet. It's like completely like stone flooring, like it's old school stuff. And when my dad moved,
it's like 1,000-year-old stone.
Oh my God. Like seriously.
You can feel how small you are when you walk into it.
Exactly. And, you can light candles, you can do all these things to, bring on whatever. But my dad would just go to the one down where he was living and go and, have his moment with God. And when we moved to the United States, my parents started discussing how they were going to raise us in what religion or what church moment or whatever. And they both agreed that like the churches here did not feel like the presence in Europe. They felt like a business.
Yes.
Right. And my dad hated that.
I understand what you mean exactly.
Right. So that never became a thing in our family. We discussed the presence of God. We discussed, guiding forces, and my dad and mom put us in sports, obviously, and all of these things that kept us from doing the bad things. But it wasn't by going to church that they thought that I was going to become a good person. They thought I could do that without church because we weren't in Europe going to that whole family moment situation. And they were right, but I don't also believe that people can go to church and still, that could still be a good thing for them. But I think church needs to be redefined for a lot of people.
I agree. I mean, that's literally my whole spiel. That's what I'm all about.
Right.
So a little bit of insight. My background is, so I grew up in, my home life growing up was rough. Like my mom had mental illness, undiagnosed, and my parents divorced very early. So my dad was in another state. So, single mom, only child, and mom has mental illness. It was rough,
Yeah.
for me, a local youth group, a UMYF is what they call it, United Methodist Youth Fellowship, a local youth group was kind of my life raft. The church that I grew up in was very special, very unique in that it wasn't what most people think about church. It wasn't very oppressive. It wasn't very authoritarian. It wasn't disingenuous, which is what I experienced in a lot of other churches, where people are kind of wearing masks and pretending to be people that they're not. And I can't stand that. That's something that I can kind of sniff out pretty easily, and it's hard to be around. And so a lot of how I kind of developed as a person, I learned socially to try and like make space for people to be themselves, because I just want to be myself. And it goes back to the freedom stuff that you were talking about, like politically, spiritually, emotionally. We're doing well in life when we can have our needs met and also be ourselves. When those two things kind of coexist. Yeah. Like that's when life really is like good.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that like we avoid pain or struggle or hard work. Like that's not at all part of it, because those things are important parts of it.
And they're necessary for like the growth to happen and for you to see the freedom and all of that.
Yes. And this is, so as a Christian pastor, this is the metaphor. This is the death and resurrection. This is why we worship a crucified God, is because you can't have life without some kind of death, like, or at least full, honest, sincere life. Now, I think people can get crazy about that and go into weird literalism, and that doesn't work well. But like, let's look at that as a metaphor. Like, how do you find yourself? How do you discover who you are, and how to well, something in you that's preventing you from that has to kind of die. And it's hard, and it's painful, and it's not easy to work through like, oh, my parents weren't who I needed them to be. Like that hurts. It hurts to acknowledge that. It hurts to talk about it. It hurts to, and if it hurts too much that I'm avoiding it my whole life, then I can't ever be who I really am. Versus, let's die to that. Let's just accept that, life is imperfect and this hurts. And part of the struggle is like reconciling the people who were supposed to take care of me didn't do a good job. And then that can lead to love and grace, and go, oh, well, yeah, my mom was struggling with a mental illness. My dad was afraid of my mom because of her mental illness. You can start to like behind the scenes of like, oh, everyone's just kind of doing their best, like with what they've felt,
Oh, absolutely.
All of a sudden there's like grace and forgiveness and reconciliation. And these are the things that Christianity is supposed to be about. Grace and forgiveness and reconciliation and self-acceptance and self-love and self-reflection and genuine connection with people and finding who you really are, who you were created to be. And we just kind of lost all those things because we're too busy controlling people because we need their money or we need their presence,
Right. It became like this thing, like all of a sudden we could make a lot of money doing this. This could be something that, again, it's a power thing, someone who is a strong force that can be a guiding light, like the head of a church,
if you're charismatic, if you have good stories, and especially if you are, and this is a little critical, but I'll risk being critical of my colleagues. If you can tell stories and the kinds of lies that people want to hear, like you can make a lot of money if you're willing to do it.
Right.
If you're a good storyteller and you're willing to tell the kinds of lies that people want to hear.
Right.
Like, the joke that we always make at Kindred is like, one of the things I laugh about is pastors who are out there who are just like, you know what? If you just smile and have good posture, God's going to give you everything you ever wanted. Like, dude, get out of here. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. And the problem is he does know what he's talking about. That person is probably very intelligent and very charismatic and is just willing to lie in order to get money. And that's what's going wrong.
Totally. So I want to share a little bit about my small little experience with religion that I've had throughout my last 30 years of life, because it is what deterred me from it. And then eventually I would like to see maybe if there is, like ways we can have done that differently, because I mean, I feel like my life is fantastic. I don't want to say pray to the universe. That's different. I pray to God, right? I have a relationship with God, but I also discuss in my teachings and my curriculum a lot about the energy of the universe, because we're all energy. So for me, go ahead.
So we have to talk about, like, when people say God, the word
Right.
God, like, what are we talking about?
Right. Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
What do we mean? Because I think we're all adults. We can probably walk away from the idea that God is a white guy with a beard in the clouds. Like, that's way too small and way too silly.
Totally.
And so when we talk about God, so, my job is to try and articulate that for people. And it's an impossible job, but it's one that I'm happy to spend my time doing, because it's what occupies my thoughts naturally.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm coming to, as I've worked on this for a long time, the thing you're talking about, so for me, the starting place is you have to kind of make a decision. Is existence deliberate or accidental? And if the universe, if existence and consciousness and life is accidental, then fair enough, go on your way. I don't think that's a way that leads to the best possible outcome.
Okay.
Like, of health and self-reflection and self-awareness and self-fulfillment. So I default, not because of science evidence, but just because of effectiveness.
Right.
Default idea that I'm gonna we can't know the answer to that, so I'm going to choose to lean into something is going on purpose.
Right. Everything
there's
it's
an
intentional.
intention.
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely. I agree with that, because that's how I say that you can change your life, is with intentional choices and intentional habits. That's what I do. So I use the word intentional all the time. So yes, I agree with that.
And the universe seems to be ordered. And that goes all the way from astrophysics and quantum physics all the way down to like a lot of stuff you talk about, like setting intentions, setting a direction, like claiming goals, claiming a direction that you're heading in. The universe seems to work that way. So for me, when I'm talking about God, what I'm really talking about is that the essence of that intention.
Okay.
The thing that seems to be pulling things from chaos into order. This was all random, and now here you and I are talking from 1,000 miles away over the internet, having complex ideas that we're sharing with each other through language, and we're reading each other's facial expressions and countenance, and the universe is moving towards order for some reason, when everything tells us that it should be moving towards chaos. Everything should be falling apart, and yet everything is moving towards some kind of intentional design. And I don't like to use the word design, because that has so many weird political connotations. But there does seem to be some kind of order that's manifesting itself. So when we talk about God, all I'm talking about is whatever that conscious intention is. That's what God
for everybody. Right. That feeling.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So my parents discussed that with me at a very young age. My dad introduced me to The Secret, which is the book that, Oprah and all that stuff, of the law of attraction and all that stuff, when I was 12 years old. So then I started understanding.
Look at setting intention.
That's
the whole point.
Totally. So that started becoming my guiding force. At 12, I was like, oh, okay, great. So you're telling me I have magical powers? How does this work? It doesn't make sense. And as he started introducing how he was applying it in his life, I started understanding and started applying it on very minor scales. When I got into, also a little backstory, my mom grew up Jewish, right? Her family was very Jewish. and she met my dad, who was Catholic, and throughout her college years, she was kind of experimenting with Christianity, Catholicism, all of that stuff, because she wanted to celebrate Christmas. That was her thing. She's like, all my friends celebrate Christmas and I don't. And, you know,
we do have the market cornered on awesome holidays.
You do. And so, you know, she just wanted to see, you know, her journey, and did she want to stay Jewish? Did she resonate with that, all of that? And I see people doing that when I was going to high school with Mormon, right? That's a lot of like, they grow up a certain way, this is how it is, and then they get to a place in high school, early college, and they're like, ooh, maybe this isn't me. And then they realize certain things that don't coincide with what they've been learning their whole childhood, and then they have to start making some adult decisions,
which actually is the natural. That's how it is supposed to go.
I agree. I think you should be doing that growth, and it shouldn't be like, oh, my parents failed if I'm questioning my religion. It's like, no, you should be
well, again, that's a byproduct of Christianity somehow got hyper focused on control of other people's behavior. And it goes right down to parenting too. Like, a lot of parents feel like because they can't control their teenager or their young adult, son or daughter, that somehow that's wrong and bad. It's like, no, that's the way it's supposed to go. Like, you want your children to have a will and a mind of their own that they
explore.
Yeah. Like,
totally. Yeah. And they need to be able to make their own, you know, mistakes and figure things out and explore the world. And that you know, I mean, yes, you want to keep them safe.
Yeah. Spare them for the pastor that I was a youth director before I was a pastor. And the pastor that I worked for, we used to always say, like, your job is to spare them from head wounds, but not to spare them from getting hurt. Like, they have to stumble. They have to make mistakes. You know, you don't want somebody to, you know, get addicted to meth while they're a teenager. Like, that's horrible. That's going to ruin your life. That's a head wound. But like, you know, some kid had sex with his girlfriend and maybe he wasn't ready for it emotionally. It's like, well, you know, we can talk about that. That's that's a survivable mistake. Let's talk about that, and let's do it in a community where you're loved and protected with people who want to take care of you.
Right. And they're not shunned for the mistake that they made.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. So then I went away to college, and I was trying to find my community, and you know, everywhere I go, as you know, because for those of you who don't know, Chris and I also bond over dancing, because that's how he met. I love that. And so I always go to a new city or a new place and I find my dancers. And I went to Kansas State University. There really wasn't a lot of dancing going on. So I was like, okay, let me see if I can find a community that I can relate to, just make some friends. So I found a group of people called Navigators, and they were again, it was a, you know, Bible study kind of thing, but it was a little bit on a bigger scale because it wasn't so intimate. It was more like everybody that kind of wants to find some sort of, you know, guiding force, come on down, you're all welcome. So I went to a meeting and tried to make some friends. And you know me, Chris, like, I know very quickly if this is for me or not. Like, I don't waste any time. And I've always been like that. And so I quickly realized that almost all the women that were there were looking for a husband.
Yep.
That's what they wanted
we do be doing that.
Yeah, I was not. I was like, I just wanted to have fun and just, you know, enjoy my college years. And I was not looking for anything serious, but all these women are like, I got to find someone to marry. All the guys were looking for someone to marry because that's what their moms told them to look for. They really didn't want that, but that's what they felt like they were supposed to be there to do.
Well, can I peel the curtain back a little bit?
Yeah, please.
So, this is the byproduct of Christianity's hyper focus on sexuality. Like, Christians are horny. Because they've been told sex. I mean, like, they haven't been told directly sex is bad, but they've been told sex is bad. Sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad. You know, all those feelings you have, they're bad. When you get really aroused because of certain visual stimuli, like a natural involuntary thing that happens to you, yeah, that's bad. That's an indication of your sin and your evilness.
Right.
And like this is the message that gets like hyper. Like I don't know why we're not as nearly focused about like lying, gossiping,
cheating.
like we're not nearly hyper focused, but we're really focused on do not have sex outside of this one specific scenario.
Which is hilarious because sex is probably the most natural part of life, and getting aroused and doing all like that is all part of, there are sex coaches that talk about natural feelings and things like that. And also
look at our track record. Like, look at the church's track record on sexuality. It's horrific. It's horrible. It's filled with rape and pedophilia. And I mean, it's just horrible. We have a horrible track record. And so like one of the things we also say on Kindred UMC, like the groups that we often say, like, I really wish the church would just get out of the business of sexuality with the one exception of consent. We should be preaching consent and then that's it. And and get out of it and be like, hey man, we obviously have proven that we are terrible at this subject.
Yeah.
Like we don't know what we're talking about. We're trying to go off of this 2,000-year-old plus manuscript on what it means to be sexually active in 2021, and it's just resulted in horrible outcomes, like just life-destroying outcomes. And so to go back to all of the the men and women, the young men and women who are like looking, it's because they have all of this drive. Yeah, they're just, everything in them wants to bone, and they're like, oh, I gotta get married. And then of course that doesn't go well either, because then you get married at 19. And because you were just so horny, you were blindingly out of your mind horny, and then all of a sudden, you find yourself at 23 a divorcee.
Right.
Like,
which I've seen so much, especially in the Mormon religion.
Yeah, it happens over and over again.
Oh my God. And I'm like, how do you not see these parents that think that they're doing so right by their kids? And I had a girl in my on my dance team that I was leading, and her and her sister were Mormon. They led the girls into terrible toxic marriages, and they were abused. The trauma that these girls went through at an early age of like 2021. And I'm thinking, oh my God, now they have to live with this for the rest of their life.
And also like psychology, primacy, recency, your first experiences with something are the things that are going to stick with you.
100%.
So these are your first experiences with sexuality are traumatic and horrifying. And like to do that to somebody on a subject that is so closely like interwoven into our biology and our physiology, like it's terrible. We have a terrible track record.
Totally. And then we haven't even gotten into the conversation, which we won't, about LGBTQ, right? Because that doesn't even doesn't even fit into the conversation at all. Because
it's just a horrible, like oppressive, controlling, unnuanced black. Like it's just a ridiculously I feel myself getting on a soapbox, but like,
I get you.
We should just get out of the business entirely.
Totally.
And like, let the experts handle this, and we're just going to follow your lead. And we can, again, I think the only moral ground we have to stand on is consent. That's the only thing we have that we can actually say something about. It's like, you shouldn't have sex with somebody who doesn't want to have sex with you.
Right.
And we can say that pretty clearly. Like we know that.
And that's an overall through all religions. That's just a normal thing to say.
Yeah. You shouldn't violate the human identity of someone else in any way. Anyway.
Yeah. So then there was that. And then the other thing that deterred me was how they said, kind of like what you said, just releasing everything to God. I remember that specifically, like, just let it all go. And if you keep going on your way and you just let God handle it, you will get everything that you want. Yeah. And that for me was not in tandem with what I was learning with law of attraction and all of these things, where I am able to have control over and make intentional decisions about my life. And I don't have to just sit back. I don't sit back. I'm a hard worker. I do those things. And I think it felt to me like people were looking for an easy way out. If I follow God and I go to church and I'm very consistent and I do these bare minimum things, that's what, I'm not judging, but that to me is what it looked like, then I will have the life of my dreams. And I was like, that A doesn't equal B for me on that.
It doesn't add up. Anybody who's thinking critically, it doesn't add up. And quite frankly, this is why, in my opinion, mostly, and this is a very broad statement, there are certainly exceptions, but broadly speaking, the church in the West is comprised of people who are not thinking critically, not self-aware. They're self-indulgent, complacent. So we talk about,
they want to be handed things, that kind of thing. Yeah.
And to the detriment of others.
Right.
It's not just that they're not concerned about others, it's that they are willing to sacrifice others on an altar of their own comfort. So the whole, what we're doing at Kindred, the whole starting point was the church's mission statement is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. That's the United Methodist mission statement. So our job as a church is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And when I started looking at, okay, so what is the end result of all of our best efforts to quote unquote make disciples of Jesus Christ? Well, it's a bunch of fat white people who don't know what they're talking about and are willing to completely abuse other people for the sake of their own comfort. It's like that
sounds like politics.
Yeah, well, when I read the Bible, that's not who Jesus is, even remotely. It's almost the antithesis and opposite. And it's confounding to me. It's not just that we went off by a couple of degrees. You know what I mean? We went 180 degrees in the exact. We produced some of the worst people in the world. When I read scripture and I look at Jesus is relating to people who are outcasts, relating to people who have lost hope, relating to people who are constantly abused by the system. He's taking pot shots, and he's actually some of the translation is difficult, but he's actually really funny and makes fun of all of the people in power, and he embarrasses them publicly constantly, and he just constantly proves how much smarter he is than them, and makes them feel like idiots and embarrasses them in front of other people. And then the people who are embarrassed for who they are, he constantly lifts up, constantly is drawn to, constantly accused of he's what the hell happened here?
Yeah.
How did we go in the exact opposite direction? So our whole thing, for the whole point of this church that we're doing here is okay, so how do we actually get people to not necessarily talk about Jesus, but to talk to other people in the way that Jesus talks to them? So you don't have to bring up Jesus and be all, churchy Jesus-y. You can just be an intelligent, emotionally aware, safe place for other people. You can be a good listener. You can be confident and self-assured in a way that allows other people to be confident and how do we train people to do that? Because it doesn't happen by accident. You can't just go to a Sunday morning and listen to some white guy talk for an hour and then somehow be better. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
It happens through effort and practice. It happens through community. You have to have other people who
conversation.
Are willing, yes. You have to have other perspectives. You have to be open to those others' perspectives. You have to acknowledge and confess that there are things about you that you are unaware of. You don't know everything about you, and other people who you allow in can tell you the things you can't see, then you have to want to actually address those things. And you like it's a hard thing. To be a good person is a hard thing, and it takes practice.
Isn't that crazy though? That like, I feel like we were, you know, I work with a lot of coaches in manifestation and in higher self, and, you know, all these life coaches that are saying we were born already a good person and knowing how to grow and do all these things. And society takes all of these things and conditions and programs us, and society, church is a part of society, you know, all of that. So really a lot of us say in my line of business is growth is not about learning how to manifest or learning how to grow or learning how to create sustainable habits. It's about unlearning all of this crap that we have been put on us for so many years that have become, you know, conditioned thoughts that we have to reprogram in order to not have these limiting beliefs. And, you know, for those of you listening, you can understand why, you know, I bonded with Chris so quickly, because to go back to our original story of when I met Chris, Francisca, his wife, we hadn't seen each other for a while, and she called me and wanted me to be a bridesmaid in her wedding. And all of our friends were like, oh my gosh, she's getting married. That's so awesome.
She had like 13 bridesmaids.
It was crazy.
I had to call other people and be like, hey man, I need you to be in my wedding. I need you to walk somebody down the aisle.
She goes, I'm marrying a pastor. And our other friend Joan and I, we were traveling together, and we were like, what? Like you said, people who know her she would never have gravitated towards a society defined pastor. And I was like, oh my God, like we had never met you. We were going to your wedding and supporting this marriage. And we were like, what if he's terrible? What if he is like tricking her into marriage? I have no idea what's happening. And we got there, and you were the most, the first word that comes to mind is it's just chill. You were so just welcoming and so conversational, and like you said, open to other ideas. And I was able to have conversations with you the way that I like to have conversations with people, where we can discuss the hard stuff, right? I used to do this on my old podcast, Today Over Tea. You discuss, you know, we can discuss racism, politics, all the things that everyone says to avoid, and we can do it in a healthy way that allows us to hear the other person out, even if we don't agree, and not attack the other side.
Yeah, we've gotten in a weird, I've been increasingly concerned about this. And I've actually been trying to kind of like let it go, because it fills me with a lot of anxiety. We're getting into a situation where we're being taught, and we're accepting what I will call a lie, that when you disagree with someone, you have to hate them. Like, and I don't think it clicks in our brains that way. I don't think that's what we consciously say to ourselves, but that is the underlying like feeling that's happening. Like we're believing that like if I watch Stephen Colbert and John Oliver and I identify as a liberal, then anyone who voted for Trump is my enemy and I hate them.
Right. And how dare they,
put
someone like that in power. Yeah.
It's not enough to just disagree with them. I have to somehow socially punish them. Mm-hmm. And that means I can't be in the same room with you. You don't get to be friends with me.
Right. I take you off my Facebook and I unfriend and yeah. So, and I think,
and of course, vice versa. I don't mean to just like it definitely goes both ways. I've seen it on both ends of the spectrum.
Totally.
And it's totally just wrong and a lie and the exact opposite of what humanity is supposed to be about.
Yeah. I see, I've had conversations with my mom about this because she has high opinions about Trump, Biden, all that stuff. And I think she said that a lot of it started, she said, that's when it started, was when Trump became president. And I said, I disagree.
Yeah.
I think it started way before. And I think Trump was a stimulus that just was the bomb that went off that automatically just exposed so many of these people that were already having these feelings that were not feeling comfortable enough to express them publicly. And now they are comfortable because now they've created this community of people that support their thought process.
Well, it coincided with a lot of technological, like the, social media has been around for a long time.
Yes.
But the natural evolution of the algorithms that feed us what we want to hear came to a new high as that happened.
Right.
And so we have an incredibly and I don't mean this derogatorily, but we have an incredibly divisive personality in Trump and President Trump, or candidate at the time, Trump. We have an incredibly divisive. He's very good at creating two different camps.
Correct.
And then an incredibly divisive form of technology in Facebook.
That's feeding the machine.
And so when you empower this very charismatic, divisive person with some of the most brilliant technology, I mean, the most brilliant technology that mankind has ever, or humankind has ever seen, and that happens all at the same time, suddenly you've got two different, and more than two, but you've got separate realities that people are living in. You've got one where people decide that this is real because I read it, and you've got another people who are entirely skeptical of everything, and you've got another people who just all these. We just created multiple realities, at least perception wise, with the use of these tools.
Yeah, no, you're right. A lot of documentaries like on Netflix, Social Dilemma, among others, talking about the negative effects of social media and how it controls, that I actually have a meme that same thing. They said the power of social media is, it's not guns and things that are going to kill people. It's reprogramming their brains to control them to believe a certain narrative.
Yeah. And people are worried about one day, if you've ever seen Terminator movies, one day Skynet's going to take over and they're going to bomb. No. That's not how it's happening right now. It's happening
right now. Yeah. It's happening now.
We are being reprogrammed through algorithmic learning AI.
Right.
It's happening right now, and it's not going to be a bomb. It's not going to be a bullet. It's going to be we believe in different narratives.
Over time. Yeah,
we believe in different narratives.
Right.
Reality isn't reality.
Totally. So let's talk about what it is that you're doing now that we understand the world a little bit more, and the sides and all of the way that religion has become, especially for me in my life, because I can only speak on my experience, something that I did not gravitate towards. If anything, I gravitated away from. How you are getting
and most people.
Right, exactly. But unfortunately, that becomes the majority. Why you are able to still thrive in this, not just thrive in this industry, but also help people to understand themselves better and basically reformat and redefine what religion can be, so that it can actually do what it was intended in the first place, which is to help people and not to hurt people or divide them.
So to start, we have a podcast called Kindred Spirits, an Enneagram podcast. And Enneagram is basically it's a tool for, it's kind of like a personality test. It's like a Myers-Briggs or a DISC personality, if you've ever done any of that. It's kind of like that, except it's less based in research, and it's more based in kind of like ancient mysticism. It's been around for a very, very, very long time. And so my type, there are 9 different types, and then there's a bunch of caveats after that. If you're at all interested, just Google Enneagram, and you can find all kinds of stuff.
I'll put the link for your podcast in the show notes, so anyone that is interested, you can go listen to Chris's podcast. Yeah,
and that's all. Every week we meet somebody new and we talk about their Enneagram type and try to get to the bottom of what this stuff is. So my type it's a type 1, and it's called the reformer. Some people call it the moral perfectionist, although I don't like that language. The reformer is, I think, a much better description. And so a lot of this stuff started with my proclivity to it's just kind of like in my bones to observe a system. Maybe it's a story, like at movies. I'm pretty critical of movies and books. Or a system that I grew up in, the church. It is in my bones to see a system and to see what's wrong with it, and to see how it naturally, how it could be better if we just made certain changes. That's just in my bones.
That's so true. Because now that I think about when we hang out, like that is what you do. You will, whether it's like a club or something, you naturally always go to, and not in a negative way. You're just always like, oh my God, this, well, but
I'll say I definitely can, like, and Francisca can attest to this.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I can be a little much, where I can just be like, hey, why didn't the bass is too high? Why isn't it? And just be like, hey man, why don't you just enjoy the show?
Yeah. Only a wife, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes it is nice, because I kind of relate to that too, where especially being an artist, where you go out to a club or you go out to, an experience, and you're like, oh man, if they would have just had it in this venue, it would have been like, that would have been built for that. And so I'm always like, we become a little bit critical because we're in that industry, but yeah, I can see you constantly trying to take something, but I kind of like that you want to make it better, because growth is never ending.
Well, so when I'm when I'm like swinging in a healthy direction, that's exactly how it manifests.
Right.
Again, like nothing's, all good, nothing's all bad. Like I can certainly have my like shitty moments where I'm just kind of like being nasty and talking and shit about people and they're this and that and that. And I can get in that mode, and we all have work to do. But when I'm exactly. When I'm at my best, though, the way that works really well is it can be very helpful. I seem to be able to pick up on things within systems that most people either, I don't think they're unaware of them. That's what's really frustrating to me. I think they're just afraid to tackle them. I think they get scared. Like, I think everyone knows what's wrong with the church, but most everybody in the church is afraid to address it. Sure. Like all the pastors I know, that's my hunch, as best I can discern from like casual conversations. But I've always been the type of person who's like, nah, man, if it's not real, I'm not interested. I want to get into it, and like, even if it's scary, like, that's fine. Let's talk about this. Let's be scared. Let's all be scared together. Yeah. Like, let's do it. Like, because if we do it together, then I can do it. If I have to be scared on my own, I'm going to be really, really scared. And I don't like that. But like, let's all get scared together, and then we can like, bind our arms and like make a mean face at the enemy, and like, let's go for it together, let's do it. You have
support. You have support. Yeah.
It's so much easier to be in the dark if you're with someone than it is to be alone. Like let's do that.
When I fly on an airplane, I fly all the time. And even to this day, now that I'm, with Noelle and married and everything, I hate flying by myself. Like, it just, there's just all this anxiety that comes up in my head, and I'm like, something could go wrong, or like, I don't know.
It's scary.
And I fly with him, whole different experience. It's like,
absolutely.
This is my person. We're in it together. Like,
man, we're primates. We're pack animals. Like, we were designed to be in community. That's how we evolved, So the whole thing of this is, I pick up on those things pretty quickly, and that's just kind of my natural inclination, my natural giftedness. And it also works out that I was a chaplain for Tampa General Hospital for over a year. We did something called CPE, Clinical Pastoral Education. And it's pretty intense stuff. You're dealing with deaths and people who are, I could go on and on about all the horrific situations that you are faced with every day. And your job is not to like fix those, but to be with people in them. And like,
be their support system.
Yeah. Well, so you can hear the contradictory. My nature is to observe what's wrong and discern a pathway forward. And how do we do this? How do we address this? And then my chaplain education is like, we're going to throw you into situations that there is absolutely no solution for. And so like it created this, if I do say so myself, it created this like highly emotionally intelligent, like able to flip back and forth between my two modes, pretty self-aware, because my peers in that chaplaincy group were also equally trained and equally intelligent, and equally good at those things. And then we would point that focus at each other and be like, hey man, I noticed you did this. Like, why do you do that every time? And we would have those types of educational moments with each other. So so like all of that to say, isn't this what we're talking about as when we talk about making disciples? Aren't we talking about people who know what they're good at, know how to use that? Like, we're all created on purpose is my underlying belief. Like, nobody's an accident,
Right.
That's my just underlying belief. There's an intention going on here. You are on purpose. And so what is it that's on purpose about you? And then also, to go back to the one of the phrases we use a lot is nobody gets out of childhood clean. Like, the world's going to do some shit to you. Yeah. You're going to develop coping strategies, and you're going to have defense mechanisms. And if they follow you into adulthood, they get in the way of the on purpose.
Right. The unlearning that we were talking about earlier.
This is the nature of the unlearning. What we're really doing is we're unlearning the coping mechanisms and the defense mechanisms that were necessary. They helped us survive trauma. And that's wonderful. I'm glad they're there. I'm glad that humans have the ability to disassociate with their body, because when trauma happens, and you can just go somewhere else in your mind, and that will help you survive.
But they're no longer serving us as an adult.
The problem is that you're not in that crisis anymore. Right. And as an adult, you're not in immediate danger, but it's really, really painful to not disassociate with your body, because now you're going to have to grieve whatever trauma you suffered. Like, these are hard things to do, but those are also the things that make us like able to enjoy and fulfill life, like the on purposeness of life. And you're just, no one's ever happier than when they're living on purpose. Like, that's our calling. That's what I believe is the ultimate kind of expression of this. We talked about God as this intention, this conscious intention of creation. Nobody is ever happier than when they're cooperating with that intentional on purposeness of who they are. And it is my belief, and it is my observation, that when we are able to do that, when we can unlearn those coping mechanisms, and it comes through hard work, it comes through a commitment to a community, it comes through some serious expertise. Like, you need help. You need somebody who knows what they're talking about, who's walked down this path before. Like, all of these things, that's what the church, I believe, was supposed to be. And instead it turned into this other thing. But like, when you can do that, when you can unlearn those things and really live on purpose, things also just have this way of kind of working out. Like, it's not magic, and I don't want to make it seem supernatural, because it's not. The thing I was criticizing earlier about the church was like, if you just smile and have good posture, everything's going to be fine. It's not that.
Right.
But there does seem to be something going on when we can like unlearn our coping and defense mechanisms and really fully be ourselves. Life seems to take on kind of an effort and an energy of its own. And like, things kind of, it's weird.
It's not weird. I mean, life coaches, again, I have a manifestation coach, business coach. We all talk about this all the time. It is exactly what your higher self is trying to accomplish. And it's the concept of, you have to both be living intentionally and in aligned action, but also be surrendering. And that's, as a recovering perfectionist,
surrender.
That is the hardest part for me. That has been the hardest part through my whole growth process, because I've been living in aligned action my whole life. That's the reason that I didn't feel like
that comes naturally to you.
That came naturally to me from day one. And intentional decisions and going for it. And I want to be a world champion. I become a world champion. But then the surrendering part is like what they were trying to teach me in Navigators, is like, if you just sit back and let God take care of it, everything will work out. And that's not at all what I felt.
Yeah, they were doing an unnuanced, unrealistic version of it.
Right.
But there's a kernel of truth.
No, there is. And my manifestation coach said to me, you got to be set. It has to be said in a different way for it to make sense in my head. And she uses so many metaphors. A couple of them are like the ant and the butterfly, where the ant's on the ground and can only see so far ahead. But the butterfly is the universe and can see so far ahead. So you're over here wanting this relationship or this job. It's going to be perfect. But the butterfly sees all these other things ahead that you can't see. So again, it's just, the perspective. And if you trust in the universe and the butterfly, then keep walking, keep going. It's up there. But you have to surrender knowing that that's there. Or another one she uses is the Amazon package.
You have to trust something beyond you.
Exactly. And the Amazon package is we walk in aligned action. We press select, we pay for our item, and we don't sit and refresh our email every day waiting for the package to arrive or open the door. Is it here yet? Is it here yet? Right? You just know that it's coming. And that's a level of surrendering. It'll be there. So
one day you'll just be there. That's
it. And I already did my job. I purchased it. I paid for it. And I shipped it to my house. Now I have to let the universe do the rest, And so it's simple little things, but I was like, wow, that makes so much sense. Like you said, to have a level of surrender that, is necessary for the fulfillingness and the, like you said, the love of your life and intentional life that you're living to happen.
Well, it's hard because I am the type, the anxiety that I deal with on a generalized basis is always in the realm of things that are out of my control. It's always in the things that right now we live in the nicest house I've ever lived in. I love this place. I love the location. I love the actual bones of the house. I love my backyard where I can go every morning and watch the dog chase squirrels and like everything about it. I love who I'm working with. The people that I'm working with right now are as fun as I've ever had. I love the job I'm doing. It feels like I'm not working because a lot of the work, certainly there's paperwork and stuff you always have to deal with, but the majority of my job is hanging out with cool people and talking about things I want to talk about and playing music and recording and editing and it's cool things that I like to do for fun. This is the best. Now, here's the thing. I am constantly afraid that I'm going to lose that now. Because there's something about the universe that is hey man, you are not in control.
Right. Nothing lasts forever, good or bad.
And our natural human tendency is to exert more control. Then if I can have more control over those things, then I'll be more safe and nothing can be taken away from me. But it's the exact opposite. It's what you're talking about. The real answer to life is actually surrendering to the idea that the universe is made of grace. That there is an intention that wants good things for you. And if you will let go of control, do the things you're supposed to do. You need to work hard, you need to work out, you need to take care of your health, you need to eat right, you need to pay attention to your emotions, and you need to treat people well, and all these different things. You need to do the hard work of life, but also do it in cooperation with an existence that wants you to be you and wants to put you in your perfect place that is going to really help you fulfill who you are supposed to be. And that's where you're going to be the best. Cooperate.
Oh my God, I have goosebumps because that's literally why I have anxiety. I've never had anxiety on an airplane. I've been flying since I was 6 months old. And now that I am married to the love of my life and we're building this incredible empire together, I'm like, oh my God, if I'm on a plane without you, what if something happens and I lose everything? I 100% relate to everything you're saying right now. That's crazy.
It's profoundly human.
It's human, right? Totally. Yeah. I think, first of all, knowing us and knowing this conversation, we could go on like this for hours. We might need to do a part 2. However, I love the fact that you are, the way that you do things, just for those who are trying to get kind of like a mission statement from this kind of podcast, is that you are ever evolving in what the world is creating, to be able to lead with intention, again, that word. Because you're not taking, again, it's like, why do people customize their own weddings go way back to, actually in bonds of holy matrimony till death do us part kind of thing. And everyone thinks that it's like this, like it used to be like arranged.
I've got a book that's like, I can just walk you through it. We can just do the book.
Yeah. And now, people have customized it to understand what marriage is to them. And I think that's what a lot of churches are missing, is they are like, well, we have this book, this Bible that has been, it is, you can't rewrite it. This is like the guiding force. And unfortunately, it's like the Constitution. There needs to be amendments, because we are constantly evolving as a society, and we now have LGBTQ, and we have rights for women, and that needs to be ever evolving in order for us to continue to thrive as a society. Well, and so that's what you are doing. That's different from
I would say, because I absolutely, I definitely agree with everything you just said. I would also say there's something about the interpretive nature, our human desire for control and literalism is corrupting the intended heart behind a lot of what the Bible says, is my take on things.
Gotcha.
Because there's slavery in the Bible, which is like awful. It's horrible. Right. But if you read throughout and I understand, like, not everybody, like, I get paid to do it. I've studied it. If you go through the Bible, the idea of slavery gets amended throughout the text. Like, it starts as like, hey man, treat your slaves like people, don't treat them like animals. And then it goes into, hey man, every 7 years you have to release everyone who's indebted to you, and that was like slavery, and then it goes into the Bible itself constantly evolves. And so it's silly that we're not,
the humans are not
continuing to do that.
Right.
Like, here we are 2,000 years later, and we're stuck on where it was. Right. It's like, no, look at the heart. Like, look at the intention. Like, this is obviously a human forward, identity forward document. This was incredibly progressive for its time.
Right.
And like, somehow we just lost it.
We've lost our direction.
Lost it.
So to wrap up, like I said, I'll put, podcast link, all of Chris's links. If you're interested in having more conversations or listening to the conversations that he has, you can find those all in the show notes. Chris, for someone who, not particularly me, because I've come to a place with my religion and all of these different things that, and my, the way I bring energy into the universe, worldview or whatever. But for someone who would maybe be listening to this, who would feel like they've been scarred by the church, they grew up, it just hasn't worked for them, why should I believe it now, kind of thing, for what you're doing in particular, and hopefully we have more people that follow in your footsteps in different parts of the world to create more of an inclusivity within the church, concept, what would you say to them?
So first thing that comes to mind is, don't do it alone. You can't do this alone. If you're interested in the fullness of really like finding out who you are and trying to cooperate with this intentional order behind everything, you can't do it alone. That's been my experience. I mean, maybe there's somebody out there who can, but in my experience, you really, really need help. And then the second part, which is very, very close to it, pick the place that works for you. Not every organization out there is right for you, and it's not to say that they're bad either. It's just
not for you.
Yeah, everyone's different. So if you've tried a couple and been like, well, this place sucks, fair enough. but there's just such an immense opportunity on the internet, and with all, like, find someone who you connect with, find a philosophy you connect with, find an organization you connect with that you can believe in, you can trust yourself to be vulnerable with. And I think that's where the work really begins. So whether it's Christine or me or somebody else, like, go ahead and look for help. Find the help to do this. And also, I was having a conversation with one of our folks. She's a relatively young adult woman, and we just got into a kind of a serious conversation, and I found myself kind of in the place of, like, there's no other more important question to ask than these questions. Like, what are you waiting for? Like, get on it. We all die one day,
Right.
Like,
you have to, I always say everyone has to do the work sometime. So whether you push it off,
it now.
Right. You got to start, because the work takes time.
Yeah. Get onto it. And there's, like, you want more years of good, full life. And we all die one day. So, like, get onto it. Let's do it. Like, there's help out there. Find it. Like, there's no more important work to do with your time than this.
Totally. Well, yeah, absolutely agree. And that's why we're doing this, is because, if you stumbled across this podcast, it was not, again, like Chris says, it's not by accident.
There's an intention.
There's an intention behind this. And if you're looking for answers, which at one point we both were, and we found the answers we were looking for with community, with curriculum, with teachings, with exercises, with whatever. For me, it was sports, but then sports created more problems for me later on that I needed to undo, and I needed to find more answers, and it's out there. And we hope that we can just be, a little bit of, like you said, if it's not us, find someone who it works for that can help you, that something that resonates with you. Don't feel like it has to resonate with you because it resonated with your parents, or because they told you this is how it has to be, or you grew up in a private Catholic school. My husband went to Catholic school.
Be honest with yourself.
Yeah. You got to find your path, and your path is going to be what's going to work best for you. And don't be afraid to own that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Thank you so much for doing this. You're amazing.
It was a pleasure. I love this.
Thank you so much for listening to the Recovering Perfectionist Podcast. I'm Christine, and if this episode resonated with you or spoke to you in any way, please feel free to share. I absolutely love hearing from you guys and your thoughts about the topics based on your experiences. And also, if there's anything you want me to talk about, just screenshot this episode and share it on social media with your comments. Your feedback really helps me to curate episodes that best serve you. If you have time, I would greatly appreciate if you could leave a review wherever you're listening to this episode, whether on Apple or Spotify or any other platform. I'm wishing you a blessed week ahead, and remember, perfection doesn't exist. Take